But the reality is there are some real conspiracies dating back to the atomic bomb, and this I get into in the book. The development of the atomic bomb was one of the biggest conspiracies in history. 100,000 people were involved, and only about 12 actually knew what they were doing. The rest of them were doing something they had no idea. There were even fake cities made full of all of these engineers who had no idea what they were actually working on. Cities that then vanished afterwards. There were, efforts to take the word nuclear out of all newspapers. They even took it out of cartoons. Even the Buck Rogers comic book was censored because they wanted to take the words nuclear and anything having to do with nuclear weapons out of it, so that people wouldn't even think in that realm. So there have been massive conspiracies in history. And looking at the UFO world, there's no question that the Roswell investigation and what happened afterwards was covered up. There was a cover-up. And so that's it feeds this whole thing. If they had been more open about it earlier, perhaps less people would believe in UFOs. That's the interesting thing. Is hiding it is what's made it into the sort of crazy world it is.
Yeah, and it's such a fun subject, such a fun thing to get freaked out about.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's coming out now that pretty clearly pilots have seen things that we still don't understand. I think it's pretty clear that there is in the possession of the Air Force or Bigelow some objects that we still don't understand. And so, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the guy who was in the U.S. Air Force in San Diego, Captain Fravor, I believe his name was, who shows that which originally came out with that video of his radar tracking that object. That guy you can hear that guy's voice on the video. He's freaked out.
Oh, yeah.
This guy's a rock solid military man. I mean, he's not a conspiracy theorist. This guy has no interest in UFOs or aliens.
No, there's absolutely been things that radar operators and Navy pilots have seen that cannot be explained yet.
Right.
Whether there's some sort of weird technology that somebody has figured out here that we can't conceptualize yet, okay, that's a possibility. But you can't throw out the extraterrestrial thing. And that's part of the whole point of my book, 37th Parallel, is that 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, you could throw it out because we didn't know that there were so many Earth-like planets out there. We didn't know that some of these planets aren't really that far away. And we used to think that it was impossible to traverse these vast distances because we didn't have the technology. But that's actually changing. We're at a point right now where we find new planets every day that could support life, right? And we also are at a point where our technology has advanced to the point where getting to 1/5 the speed of light is not technically impossible anymore. 1/5 the speed of light, you can use solar sails to get there. It's been theorized that, that you could, and there's something called the Starshot program, where they're going to make postcard-sized probes attached to massive solar sails, that you could actually get these things up to 1/5 the speed of light. If that's the case, you can get to the next Earth-like planet in about 20 to 40 years. And that's not that long. So the idea that these vast regions of space are just too far, it's not really true anymore. And so the reasons to not believe in UFOs has definitely changed.
Have you ever heard of a guy named Robert Hastings?
I've heard the name, yeah.
Yeah, he wrote that book, UFOs and Nukes.
Yeah, I have that book. Fascinating. So yes, a lot of UFO sightings are around, but that could be evidence of Russians as well,
Yeah, that's the scary thing. That's what everybody's freaked out about, is that this isn't some extraterrestrial thing. This could be China or Russia.
Right. And there's a great book. I just lost the name of it. This woman wrote, what was it called? About Roswell, and what her belief, what Roswell was actually Stalin had sent over a fake UFO to try and scare the Midwest. It was a brilliant book. I can't remember what it was. I think it was called Area 51. Was that what it was? But yeah, I mean, there's lots of different theories that don't involve extraterrestrials that could explain it as well. But because of the policy of keeping it as secret as possible, or outsourcing it to Robert Bigelow, who keeps it as secret as possible, it makes it very hard for anyone to know what's really going on.
So did Bigelow do the initial archaeological dig in Roswell near Area 51?
So Chuck Zukowski was involved in that. It was actually a television show that did the original one that I wrote about in my book. But what happened was Chuck found something he found a weird piece of metal during this archaeological dig. And he basically went online and said, is there anyone out there who can help me analyze this piece of metal? And he was approached by Bigelow's people. They said, yeah, we'll analyze it. This is what we do. So he sent them the metal, and then they never sent it back to him. So he actually ends up going and trying to get it back. It's a really interesting story. But Bigelow's people were involved at the time with basically investigating any UFO sighting or anything that could have any legitimate connection to UFOs or Roswell or something like that. He was well funded. His team had the funds, real laboratories, and they would go out and research this stuff. Roswell has been investigated numerous times, many times. What happened at Roswell is still completely, masked in mystery, I guess. Something was found there. Whatever that thing was that was found still exists, but nobody knows what it is.
The reason I have trouble with the cow mutilations, especially relating to Skinwalker Ranch, like, yeah, it's super weird. There's no blood. There's these surgical incisions. But there's no hard evidence really of anything ever happening there. No,
there's no evidence. So Skinwalker Ranch and cattle, they're two separate things, but take the cattle mutilations. I mean, cattle mutilations are a weird phenomenon. It's gone on for a very long time. There's no good theory of what they are. The FBI at first thought it was a cult rituals. Then they thought it was a motorcycle gang that was doing this for some reason as some sort of ritual to join the motorcycle gang. But in the end, they concluded that we don't have any evidence of either of those things. So nobody really knows what that is. Why it would be related to UFOs, I could not tell you. The only reason that people relate it to UFOs is a lot of times people see lights in the sky or hear weird noises or things like that if you talk to these ranchers. So that's the connection, but there's no evidence that a UFO would have any reason to do that. So yes, that's just one of the weird phenomenon that seems to happen along the 37th parallel. Skinwalker Ranch was this weird, crazy ranch in Utah where lots of things were seen anecdotally, weird, changes in time and monsters appearing, mutilated cattle, and then Bigelow bought it. Bigelow's people actually bought Skinwalker Ranch, set up a bunch of scientists to work there for years and put down what they saw. But again, no evidence ever came out. That doesn't mean there isn't evidence. And so the question is, what's going on at Bigelow? He's got lots and lots of files, which he's never spoken about, never shown to anyone. And he's moved into a legitimate, aeronautics business, which, makes pieces for the International Space Station and just sort of brushes over that whole UFO thing, which he was involved with for many, many years. So the question becomes, are there files there? Is there info there? Are there objects there? What does he have? And we don't have the answer to that.
What is the most unexplainable or questionable thing to you about your book, about everything that you studied and everyone you talked to making writing the 37th parallel?
So I think number one, and this has come out recently, I had seen files talking about unexplained materials and objects that were not old files. So I knew that at this point in time, there are still things that the Air Force has that they can't figure out what they are. So I knew that before this recent release. So I think that was the number one thing that spurred me on, was the idea that people at very high levels in the Air Force have, are talking about it internally, materials that they can't understand. And that's weird, because if these were things found in the 50s, by now we should know what they are. Our technology is advanced to the point that we should be ahead of anything that could have been made in the 50s. So that means it must not be by us. The Bigelow stuff is very intriguing to me. But in general, it's just sort of fascinating to me. I loved Close Encounters as a movie. And so I always kind of wanted to write something in that realm. So I'm on the fence, I'm not, someone who's just a true UFO believer. I believe, in everything. I am a believer, though, that there is evidence that has not come to light, and there's information that still hasn't been explained. And so I guess that's where I land on this. I would love to see everything that the Air Force has on this subject. I would love to know, all of their sort of details about these objects. And I would love to know what Bigelow has, in his own possession. So those are the things that are most intriguing to me. But yeah, I guess that's it.
So what else are you working on? Do you have any projects that are coming up in the near future, or
Yeah,
what are you working on presently?
Recently, I wrote a serialized novel for the Boston Globe, which appeared one chapter a day for 20 days. It was a thriller, like a Da Vinci Code style thriller called The Mechanic, which ended up being very popular in the region. And I sold it to Spielberg, and I'm writing the movie now. So I'm writing the screenplay, and it's going to be a big book next fall, and then a sequel the following fall. So that's kind of the main project. So it's like a Da Vinci Code style thriller about a mystery going all the way back to the American Revolution. It's really cool stuff based in real facts, and I think you'll like it a lot.